Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Allison Arzeno. Allison is the CEO of Assurance. Assurance helps people choose the best insurance products for themselves. And as CEO, Allison leads the company's strategy to scale and drive growth while staying true to its original mission of building a better insurance solution for the mass market. Allison joined Assurance in 2017 as the chief data scientist, then became president in 2020 and CEO in 2021. She is passionate about using data science to help people address life's most important challenges and teaching others to find answers in data for themselves. It started with her work in operations research at MIT, where she earned her PhD studying how predictive modeling can help diabetes patients personalize care. She later applied this expertise as CEO of a health wearables startup focused on heart health and as a data science consultant at Sequoia Capital. Allison is the co-author of The Analytics Edge, a widely accredited business analytics textbook, as well as a former lecturer at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and MIT Sloan School of Management. In addition to receiving her PhD from MIT, Allison holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of California, Davis. Welcome, Allison. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm hitting you with some rapid fire. This is a new one I've actually never asked on the podcast. Are you more spontaneous or do you prefer stability?
Ooh, probably stability, but I challenge myself to be more spontaneous.
And what's the best concert that you have ever attended? That's a tough one, right?
It is. I'm a big country music fan, so I would probably say Toby Keith.
Nice. And I'm assuming you have lots. What are your nicknames?
Mostly just Allie. So my friends and family will call me Allie.
And do people at work call you Allie?
No, they do not.
You're Allison.
Yes.
When do people get to cross over to Allie?
It's very organic. I think most people at work just don't know that I go by Allie. So yeah. I'm sure at some point they will discover that and it will get picked up.
What are people most often surprised to learn about you?
I would say people are often surprised that while I'm very data driven in a lot of ways, I love approaching problems through a creative kind of artistic viewpoint as well, which relates to my data science tilt.
Yeah. And okay, so do you hate to lose or love to win?
I am competitive. It's a bit more of a subtle competitive nature, I would say. But I love to win.
Yeah. What is the best way for you to clear your head?
Now that we're driving back into the office, I will use my commute time to do that. So on the way to the office, I'm very intentional about using that as mental preparedness time. And on my way home from work, I will use that as reflection time. But I find that really useful.
Yeah. It's funny because during the pandemic, right, it was like there's no space between the two. So there was all those articles written, right, about just everything blends together. So I can totally appreciate that.
For sure.
Yeah. So tell me, I know that you've only been in Seattle a couple of years, but how do you like it? And where are you originally from?
Yeah, I love Seattle. We've only been here for about 2.5 years, originally from California, but I've lived in California, in Massachusetts, in Georgia, and now in Washington.
Yeah.
And have really enjoyed being in Seattle so far.
Where in California? And I guess, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, in the East Bay. I always say as far east as you can go and still call it the Bay Area. So at the time, it was a bit more rural. A lot of people started moving out there and commuting into the Silicon Valley. But I would say the 3 words I would use to describe my childhood would probably be comfortable, happy, and equal. My family put a lot of focus on equality in a lot of ways.
Equality for others in the community or equality within the family? Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older sister, and my mother has this core virtue of fairness, I would say. And so there was just in a lot of ways really thinking through things being fair, equal, us contributing to society and being involved in community service as a way to even the playing field.
Yeah, I love that. And what kinds of things were you into? It sounds like some volunteer work and outside of school. How did you busy your time?
So I was a dancer, mostly ballet dance. So that was my sport. I was part of a Masonic youth group. It's called Rainbow Girls, but it's very focused on community service. And in a big way is how I learned public speaking. And I also played piano.
Nice. And tell me about school. Was that something that, I'm guessing you were good at school. I love that you studied math. All of the lessons around STEM and getting more girls and women involved. The fact that you studied math in college, very cool. Who told you, or how did you realize you were good at math?
Strangely, I was one of those kids who always loved math. So, if you looked at my kindergarten papers, I would say my favorite subject was math. And that just never changed. I loved the logical nature of math. I loved the idea that it had this core truth to it. And it was just always something that I was attracted to. And the way that our high school was set up, you had semesters. So you chose different classes to take in the fall and then in the winter, spring. And so you could double up on subjects, which gave me the ability to lean away from English a little bit, which was not my strong suit, and double down on math.
Some families, it's like very clear that education is a huge value in the home and that accomplishment and achievement is important. Was that self-driven or was that something coming from your parents?
So my parents definitely valued education and wanted me to do a good job. But I would describe my parents' philosophy as, if you commit to do something and if you are capable of doing something, then do it well. But if you don't want to focus on that or you don't want to do it, that's okay too. So that was very much their approach. And so because I liked math and I was good at math, they did hold me to a high standard when it came to mathematics. But I could get a B in physical education or in English, and that was okay.
Yeah, because math was your thing. And so I know you went on and went to Davis. Awesome school. One of my best friends went there and just loved it. How did you choose Davis, and who was kind of guiding you through those decisions?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly how I came to this conclusion, but the conclusion I reached was that I wanted to go to a state school in California within kind of a 3 to 4 hour radius of home. And so my big contenders were Berkeley, UC Davis, and then Cal Poly. Those were the three I was really pursuing. And I ended up being accepted to all three, and we went to visit those schools. And Davis was the one that just really felt like home to me. I showed up and I went through the tours and met people, and it just matched my personality. It matched my style. I felt like I would be comfortable there, and that really guided my decision.
Was it the right choice for you?
I think it was. There was a part of me that questioned if Berkeley was the better choice, because on paper, you would say that's the better school academically. But I think going to Davis and pursuing the school that felt right, that felt comfortable, actually gave me a lot of confidence as a young adult that allowed me to really jump off from there.
Yeah. And so studying math, what was your goal as far as like what you wanted to be? I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, like there is no linear path necessarily, but I guess there's a guidance counselor saying, hey, these are some of the paths you can take. What were you thinking you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, so my first couple of years in college, I wanted to be a cryptologist. So I loved numbers. I loved puzzles. I was looking at like graph theory and combinatorics and all of this very theoretical math work. And so my original aspiration was to join the NSA and be a cryptologist. So
Wow.
I applied to a internship at the NSA and got rejected. And that was a moment where I said, okay, well, that's not going to work. Let me pursue something else this summer. And I got involved in some undergraduate research, and that's what took me down a different path.
And what was the path?
So my undergraduate research advisor, it was still very theoretical mathematics that he helped me work on and that I studied with him. But he was one of the first kind of teachers and mentors for me in academics who really challenged me that I was capable of more. And he helped me find the field of operations research, which is what my PhD thesis is in. And I remember when he pointed it out to me, the tagline I saw was the science of better, that's what operations research was all about. And it was this idea of using mathematics to impact the world and to have positive change. And that really resonated with me. And that's when I started to pursue that field.
And did you go straight on, or did you tell me about this order here? So you graduated from college and then what?
And then I went straight on to grad school. So I went to MIT for grad school, and that's where I got my PhD in operations research. But I didn't take a break in between.
No break in between. And tell me about if you're talking now to your younger self or to somebody who's in high school or college, would you give them the advice that that was the right move?
You know, for me at the time, I believe it was, because it was 2009. And
oh yeah, well, that says a lot right there. That alone
right,
says it. Yes.
Yeah, it was hard to get a job at the time. So I think it was the right move for me. I think it's very person dependent. I think for some people, going out and working for a couple of years is a better choice. But I don't think there was anything wrong with going straight out of undergrad to grad school.
Mm-hmm. And so you went on to grad school, and you're thinking then now things start to pivot. And I guess, what were you thinking of pursuing at this point? I mean, you got your PhD, you wrote your dissertation on what exactly?
Yeah, so I showed up at MIT, and I started by continuing to study fairly theoretical work. So the problem I was working on is actually called the probabilistic traveling salesman problem. And we would argue why it had real world applications, and maybe it does a little bit, but I was working on building an algorithm that would allow us to prove that we could solve this problem just a tiny bit better. And I remember one night in I forget if it was my first or second year, but it was probably 2 a.m. I'm in the dorm common room, just trying to figure out how to solve this problem and come up with something to show my advisors the next day. And I just thought, I don't know that I care enough about this problem. Even if I stayed up all night, every night, all week, I don't feel like this is going to have the impact I'm looking for. And so I went to my advisors and said, I think I want to do something else. And that's when I pivoted to focus a bit more on healthcare applications.
Interesting. It looks as if you're going academia in the very beginning as I'm researching. And
Yes.
then you kind of go on and you've got this, academic experience through MIT, and you're a lecturer. You've done some teaching at MIT, some teaching at Stanford. You've even written a book. And then you've done some consulting, going on to some work experience in data science. How does all this happen? Are you making decisions along the way? Or are you making relationships, and then those people plant these ideas? Are you having experiences where you don't like what you're doing? I always love just learning how people make decisions.
Yeah, definitely. So I realized that I wanted to go into industry instead of just stay in academia, because I thought, I wanted the direct impact of being in industry, but I was also just more excited and passionate about that. But at the same time, being a teaching assistant as a grad student made me realize how much I really loved the teaching side of academia. And so that's where I was I was torn because I wanted to do that, do the teaching side, not necessarily the academic research side, but also go out into industry. And everyone kept saying to me, I had to choose the two. And I'm a silently stubborn person, I would say. And so my reaction was, I'm just going to do both. And so that's where I said, I'm going to start working in the startup space and go out into industry. But startups have enough flexibility that I could also kind of lecture on the side.
Yeah. And is that this Dynamic Ideas Health?
Yeah, Dynamic Ideas Health was actually the first startup I co-founded with my PhD advisor, rooted in my PhD thesis.
And what was that company, and how far did you take it?
Yeah, so my PhD thesis was about building a system for individuals with diabetes where you could improve your meal plans and exercise plans to actually better control your diabetes and either scale back on medication, avoid medication, or just frankly be healthier. And so we use data from blood glucose monitors. We tried to learn somebody's preferences for foods and when they eat and how they eat to come up with this like optimal meal and exercise plan. And so that product is what we tried to commercialize through Dynamic Ideas Health.
And were you able to do it?
I ended up leaving Dynamic Ideas Health before we got to that point. So my PhD advisor continued our work there, but spun off a bit more into a healthcare analytics consulting viewpoint. And so the company in a lot of ways still exists within his space, but we never actually commercialized the diabetic product.
Oh, interesting. But what a cool experience to be able to, so now you've got like both experiences. Now you're teaching. I mean, your stubbornness like helped.
Yes, exactly.
And what took you, so from there, then you ended up going out to the Bay Area. Is that the order of things?
Yeah, so while I was still in Boston, I ended up finding Qantas. They were located right across the street from the Sloan School at MIT. And one of the co-founders there had reached out to me to see if I was interested in joining their team. And I was already doing these two other things. And so I started working at Qantas about 10 hours a week, just being a data science consultant for them. And so I had started working at Qantas, and then I decided I wanted to move back to the Bay Area, to California. And Qantas was actually also opening an office in the Bay Area. And so it was a nice opportunity for me to lean a bit more into my work at Qantas. And then I also took a role at Stanford.
And what did Qantas do? And then also two questions. What was Qantas's business? And then also what is a data scientist? As a recruiter, we get roles in all the time to fill data science roles. So I feel like I have my sense of it, but it's helpful for me, for our listeners. Maybe there's someone in high school or college listening who's considering this path. Maybe you can explain what that role is.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll actually start with that one. In my mind, a data scientist is someone who uses data, uses mathematical techniques to impact a business or impact society. And so it's this idea of using mathematics, using technology to actually make better decisions. That is what a data scientist is, in my view.
And what does a data scientist do, though? So that's what a data scientist is. But so you come into the office, you sit down at the computer, and somebody's watching you, a fly on the wall. What is it that they're watching you do?
Yeah, so I would say, one, they're watching you observe different pieces of the business and how your business works and operates to identify areas for opportunity, for optimization, for improvement, or you're handed one of those by somebody else. You then grab data from your company's data lake, or I've done some web scraping before in my life, but you collect data to try to solve that problem, or data that's related to that particular business problem. And then you build a model, generally, whether it's a machine learning model to predict something, It's a clustering model to find trends and relationships. And then you basically launch that model into production, or you work with some engineers to make that happen, and use that model to actually make smarter decisions within the company.
And what kind of training does somebody need to become a data scientist?
So most data scientists, so when I was in school, data science was not a major. That was not a general label at the time. Now in a lot of places it is. You can truly just study data science. But a lot of data scientists in undergrad study operations research, which is what my PhD was in, computer science, mathematics. There's a lot of management science, it's sometimes called at some places. So there's a lot of different fields that relate to data science. And then either straight out of that, you start to pick up more and more techniques that are maybe on the margins of your exact field of study, but related. Or you go on to a master's program in business analytics or data science from there. But one of the things I actually love about data science is that people come from a lot of different backgrounds, and that makes the field and the groups you work with very diverse.
Interesting. And so I want to get back to Quantus, but as long as we're talking data science, like, what are the trends that you're seeing as far as the future of data science? And then also, I know, like in my intro, I was reading about kind of your passion, and I know that you're really interested in talking about and thinking about ways that people can use data science in general to kind of improve overall life, and kind of how you've used it at Assurance, which we're going to get into. But what's the future of data science, and why is it important for people?
Yeah, I think the future of data science has two main themes. One is just better and smarter algorithms, and there's more and more data constantly being accumulated in the world. And as we have more data, the algorithms we have can get smarter. The techniques that have been developed continue to get better. So there's just technological advancement that is in front of us. The other side, which is where I get really excited and tend to operate more, is the intersection of data science and business. And so I think today we often struggle from a problem where we have business folks who don't understand data, and data scientists who aren't in touch enough with the business and the true problems the business faces. And I think as we move forward, if we can find more people who sit at that intersection, who are both passionate about business and understand business, but also speak data and understand the techniques that can be used to improve the business, that's a really exciting future opportunity in my mind.
Yeah. And is this may be like way off topic, but I think about it as it relates to what I do, because I've been doing it for 29 years, like pre-internet. And now there's so much technology being put towards recruiting. And we are now able to look at the data and look at where there's like a cog in the wheel around things like submittals to interviews to offers to acceptances, and try to understand where there's, as far as data that we can just pull out, or pull out data around where we're finding talent. I mean, this might be a simplified version of data, but like from where I sit, this is how we're using data. Where is there an intersection between data and like the human part of how to use data to tell a story, and also where people have fear around data replacing the human side of business?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of really useful data science in business only happens because you have a human who's thinking creatively about the problem. So, what exactly are you trying to predict? What variables should you use? Which algorithms are the most useful? Even the whole field of ethical AI and data science that has come about in making sure that you're not building a model that is ethically incorrect in some way. I mean, I think recruiting is actually a great example, right? Like, how do you make sure, if, say, we built a model to predict who would be successful in what job, how are we not biasing opportunities based on who has had success in the past?
Very good point. Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense. So tell me about Qantas. It sounds like a super cool company.
Yeah, so Qantas was an amazing opportunity for me. What did Qantas do? They were building a wearable device for continuous blood pressure monitoring. So, today a lot of us wear Apple Watches and they tell us our heart rate. And so most of them, show your heart rate, activity detection, those kinds of things. We were building a wearable device that would do all of that, but also with continuous blood pressure monitoring.
Yeah. And what happened there? And I guess probably a little bit different to do data science for like a wearable device versus, insurance.
Yeah, so when I was hired, I was focusing a bit more on the activity detection side. So we had a team of engineers focusing on signal processing who were working on the core blood pressure algorithm. And I was working on some of the like add-ons, as I would call them, like activity detection. The challenge that Qantas faced was they came into the market when wearables were like the next big thing, right? Apple Watch didn't exist yet. Fitbit did, but not quite as advanced as it is today. And they were both trying to build a device, so building hardware, but then also working on these software algorithms to run on the device. So they were trying to do a lot right at the moment when this industry was taking off. And about 2 years after I started working with Qantas, that's when we realized that the algorithm wasn't quite where we needed it to be to go ahead and launch this thing. And in the meantime, now we have an Apple Watch. Now we have all of these other devices out there in the market. And so we had to pull back and say, how do we approach this problem differently? And that's where I came in and said, I think data science and machine learning could be helpful on the blood pressure side.
Yeah, it almost seems like it could have been a good acquihire, like acquisition target for one of these other huge companies, because it's like, how do you compete at that level once these other companies start to go in that direction? It's like timing is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that did almost happen for us at Qantas. But the general conclusion for the small team at the time was that we were better off saving that IP within one of the venture capital firms who was still trying to pursue this problem of a true blood pressure wearable, which frankly still hasn't really been solved.
Yeah. And I mean, can you imagine that? Like how helpful that would be?
Yeah.
I mean, incredible. Yeah, I mean, people are constantly trying to have a sense of that. And I have seen the things that go on the back of the phone where you can kind of like touch it, but that's so clunky.
Exactly.
And cumbersome. And so you did some work, I know, with Sequoia. And then what was that experience like? And did you ever consider, I mean, I know that a path for some people, and it could have been an amazing path, especially with all of your passions, was to be kind of a professor / advisor / consultant as your kind of everything versus an operator.
Yeah, so when I stopped working at Qantas, when we wrapped up Qantas and shut it down, that's when I started working for Assurance. Again, I started as a 10 hours a week consultant. I started working for Sequoia, and then I was still teaching at Stanford. So I always joked that I treated my career like a portfolio of options, where I was still, saying, I really like this teaching thing. Startups are fascinating. And consulting is super interesting because I learned so much from it. So I was continuing to dabble in all three of those things.
Right. I mean, it's smart because you can keep your options open and see if something's compelling enough. I mean, as you know, we've done some work with Assurance, and that story is just, the Assurance story is just incredible. Started in 2016. I know you came on in 2017. Can you tell our listeners who don't know Assurance, like what the business idea is and how Assurance competes in the market?
Yeah, definitely. So I describe our assurance mission with 3 words: help, improve, and protect. And that's really about our mission, our desire to help our customers, mostly mass market customers, improve and protect their lives through buying insurance and financial products. So we are a technology platform, a digital platform that also uses a agent workforce of licensed insurance agents to enable our customers to buy these products. And it's very data driven in a lot of ways, but the core piece is through personalized recommendations for the consumer.
And so who are your customers would be then the insurance companies, or like, tell me what's the business model?
Yeah, so our customers are the individual buying insurance. So we are direct to consumer, but we partner with carriers, with others in our space, frankly, to enable that. So we're kind of a broker for insurance, but a digital broker, where we have a bunch of carriers on our platform, and we help the consumer shop those different options to find the best one for their personal needs.
And how is that different than others? Why is that a competitive advantage? Like, what's different about assurance?
Yeah, so we are much more data-driven, I would say, and technology-driven. We also are hyper-focused on the personalization piece. So how do we learn everything we can about the consumer so that we can actually help them find an option that is not just a good option because it's cheaper or because it's with a great company, but it actually is a good option for what they need personally, and what matters to them. So that's really our differentiator, the thing that makes us special.
Yeah. And so you come on there, you're 10 hours a week, you're kind of dabbling, you're doing some teaching, you're doing some consulting, some advisory work, come on doing data science. I mean, obviously a huge leap from doing that to, it's like going from a player to a coach. How did you make that decision? I mean, some would say, obviously from the outside, just like you're talking about Davis versus Berkeley, like one's a bigger job, but sometimes it doesn't mean that it's the better job, right? Like being in the mix, doing the thing that you love, being a data scientist, totally different than being a CEO. And being a CEO is not for everybody.
Yeah,
was this the right move? And what has been the best part of the move, and what's been the biggest challenge of the move?
Yeah, so I have always had this passion for data science applied to business problems. And I, both at Qantas and then at Assurance, I found myself starting as the data scientist, but moving more into the business side of things. And it's really because I want to be involved in the business decisions. I want to bring data to those business decisions, and combine the two. But that's really what I love doing. And so to me, I really enjoy the CEO role in that I get to connect all of the different pieces together and really optimize those business decisions. But I also enjoy bringing data science techniques into it in a lot of ways through data-driven decisions and visualizations and real-time tracking. So I love that I get to kind of marry the two in the role.
Yeah, well, it gives you such an advantage having that background, right? Because you know what you're looking for and you know what you're asking. And then if you have the innate, I guess, leadership skills, like how would you describe your leadership style? And I know that I've heard about you because we've done work together, that you are an incredibly empathic leader and that you've got a very inclusive leadership style. But how would you describe it, and how have you heard others describe it?
Yeah, I do try to be a very inclusive leader. One of our values that we talk about at Assurance is humble collaboration. And that is the way in which I love to work, is asking everybody to truly leave your ego at the door, and show up in an effort to collaborate with others to reach the best solution. And the data-driven aspect, I think, is really helpful in that way, because when you're debating about something and you can be grounded in data and bring data into the conversation, it becomes a little less about your opinion versus mine, or your experience versus mine. And I think that allows people to truly humble collaborate and reach the best solution for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And how has it been? Obviously you've had to lead through a pandemic, you've led through an acquisition, you were acquired by Prudential. And I guess that was late 2019, right?
That's right.
And how have those transitions impacted the business and your ability to lead with your own twist and your own style?
Yeah, so I think I was fortunate in a lot of ways being a remote employee when the pandemic hit. So I joined Assurance as a remote employee, and I was still a remote employee in March of 2020. And our data science team was also fairly remote. And so we had already navigated that hybrid environment. I was traveling to the Assurance office quite frequently, every 2 to 3 weeks. So that part was obviously different than what most people are doing today. But I think that helped a lot in us saying, hey, we're already a hybrid organization. So, this is going to be a little bit different, obviously, but, we can navigate that fairly well.
And how do you keep a cohesive culture being kind of hybrid? It's a constant question on phone calls that I have with clients, bringing together leaders and having them ask each other. But then on the podcast, people want to talk about it and learn from each other.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we obviously use the same tools most people do, Zoom and Slack, to try to enable that. One of the things we've done recently that we've had a lot of success with is what we've coined Seattle Week. So while we have about 600 employees outside of our agent workforce, only about 150 of those are Seattle based. But 1 week a month, we call that week Seattle Week. And all of our local employees, we encourage to come into the office. And then people who are remote, if they're going to travel, we ask them to come during that particular week each month. And it creates an office environment that's a lot more like what we used to have. And during that 1 week, we're intentional about brainstorming sessions and bringing people together, doing a little less Zoom and a little more in person. And then the other 3 weeks of the month, we, operate in the more remote hybrid way. But it enables us to get enough of that in-person collaboration without asking people to go back to how things used to be.
Mm-hmm. And are you guys experiencing at all this, like the whole great resignation and people kind of looking into, reading all the press around just like the economy and what this looks like, and how do you keep your employees engaged and beyond the Seattle Week? Just how to keep them drawn in, and then on top of it, I know that you're recruiting for some roles. How to pull in new talent and make sure that they're aligned with your values and adding to your culture.
Yeah, definitely. We're in a pretty unique position in that we were acquired by a big company, a big corporation, as a pretty young startup. So we were a 3-year-old startup when we were acquired. Sitting here today, we're still only about a 6-year-old company. And so we still have a startup culture in a lot of ways, but we don't really have the startup risk anymore because we're part of Prudential. And so it's this really interesting blend of the stability of a big corporation with the culture of a startup. And I think that's attractive to a lot of people. So we've been able to attract some great talent because we are in this unique space.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what is your interview process like? As far as have you nailed that down? As far as how to sell the company, and if so, what are some of the selling points about kind of a day in the life, what it's like to work there? And what are the long-term plans as far as the vision if somebody's listening and they may potentially be looking for a job?
Yeah, so my number one selling point to people is if you come to assurance, you'll have the opportunity to build things from the ground up. While we have built so much, there is so much opportunity still in front of us. And so if you are somebody who likes to build things, to create something out of nothing, to fundamentally change and reconfigure a process or a piece of the business, assurance is the place for you. And hey, you can come do it with a little less risk because we have the backing of Prudential.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And as far as, where we sit today, what are you thinking about going into 2023 as far as challenges and opportunities, and what kind of keeps you up at night as CEO?
Yeah, people is definitely one of them. I care deeply about our employees and making sure that they're set up for success, and we are giving people the right opportunities at the right time. And so that's something I'm constantly thinking about is how do we make sure we're doing that really well? The other piece is in the business we're in, while some of our businesses are more immune to a recession, like our Medicare business, where it's health insurance and recession or not, it's something that you'll try to navigate and look to buy. Other areas of our business, such as life insurance, a recession environment is a bit more challenging. For some people, they view it as a discretionary buy.
Of course, like it's just a nice to have, and I'll get that if I feel a little like frothy.
Exactly. And so that's something that we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on and navigate to make sure that we're recognizing that in our consumer base that, hey, maybe now just isn't the time to buy this product and let's talk later. But also making sure consumers understand the benefit of the product, even in the environment we sit in.
Yeah. Well, speaking of life insurance, not to be like, Debbie Downer, I see you. And from where I sit, I'm like, wow, this is like total badass, young, hungry. And I'm thinking, okay, where is this person going to be later in life? Like you meet these people who are like, oh, I'm just trying to like hit it so I can retire and like sit on the beach. I kind of see you as this person who's like, I don't even know what that looks like, later in life. Like, what do you see for yourself as far as like, I don't even know if it's 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. Like, what are your big picture goals for your life?
Yeah, one is definitely continuing to have an impact on the way in which we run businesses. So I believe pretty strongly that a data-driven approach, a collaborative approach, an inclusive approach is the future and is a strong way to lead. And so I want to, continue to push that forward. I also, I'm really passionate about teaching. I loved being a lecturer. And so at some point in my life, I'm sure I will find myself going back to that.
Yeah. Well, now you're here. You can do UW.
Exactly. If they'll have me.
They would definitely have you. Are you kidding? Absolutely. And so in your abundant spare time, I guess there's not much of it these days, but how do you practice self-care? And sometimes it can be a little lonely at the top. Like, how do you keep your mental health strong and just keep your whole self kind of healthy so that you can lead your team?
Yeah, I love being outside. So whether it's hiking or going out on the water, something that gets me just outside, either, in a moment to reflect or with friends and family. We have 2 dogs that will take hiking a lot.
Oh, cool. What kind of dogs do you have?
One is a Vizsla. He's a like Hungarian pointer. And then the other one was a rescue. I think she's a mix between a Jack Russell and a Chihuahua.
Oh, wow. So that one's like dragging on the hike or leading the hike. Like I'm trying to picture the Jack Russell with the Vizsla, like which one's leading you?
Yeah, well, they are best friends.
Oh.
And the Jack Russell keeps up. If we go 6 or 7 miles, she starts to look at us like, "Are we done yet?" But she does a good job.
Yeah. Well, you're in the perfect city. I love that you love to hike. And so as far as like apps or hacks that you can share with me as another business leader, always trying to stay organized. Are there apps or systems or things that you do ritualistically to set yourself up for a good day or a good week?
I found this journal called the Productivity Planner a couple years ago, and I think it's maybe a less useful in my current role, but I will advise all of my employees to look into it because it's just a great tool that combines the Pomodoro technique with list building and focus. It has some inspirational quotes in it. It's just a really fun journal. But I also will admit that I'm a sucker for Post-it notes. So I will put all my to-dos on Post-it notes and use that old school technique as well.
Oh, a lot of people love a good Post-it note. So the productivity planner, is this like an Amazon purchase? Of course, I'm going to now buy it. It's going to be like another thing that
It is.
Okay,
And they have
maybe I'll tell
several
my team.
variations.
Well, send me a link to the one that you like.
I will.
I want to look into it because I'll do whatever you tell me. Because now you're another person I get to look up to and admire.
Oh, thank you.
I'm like, I'll do what Allison says to do. Okay, so my final question is, what fuels you?
So I would say optimization fuels me. So whether it's business optimization, so taking what we have and just making it better and smarter, people optimization, making sure we have the right people in the right roles at the right time. This idea of taking something and making it bigger and better is what fuels me.